Okay, so in this video, we are going to see how we can get a formant from a recording on Prod. So anytime you want to record anything on Prod, what you need to do is click on New and then do Record Mono Sound. And normally what I do is I keep the settings as they are, with the sampling frequency at 44,100 Hertz. And I do name the file to whatever name I want it to be recorded. Let's record it as sound A. And then once we are all set there, we are going to hit on the record button. Once we do that, you're going to notice that a green recording bar does show up in the bottom left screen that's right here. You do want to make sure that this recording is not crossing over, so which means that as long as it's green and it's almost filling up to, let's say, 1/3 of this bar, the recording's of good quality and fidelity. If it goes yellow, that's like right around here, or even red, what that means is it's not recording to its most optimal capacity. So right now, as you can see, in the view meter, it's saying not recording. As we record, it's going to show the voice bar. So again, green means okay, yellow and red is not good. And that can impact definitely the quality of or the acoustic properties of the sound that we record. Okay, so without further ado, let's start recording. And then I hit stop, and then what I would want to do is save to list and close, so which is right here in the bottom. Now remember though, if your microphone in the computer does not work, then the recording that you do get is going to look a little bit hazy or wonky. So I'm gonna save to list and close for now. And when I do that, if you do notice, on the Pratt objects right here, it says sound up. What I'm going to do now is I would want to see what that sound looks like. So I'm going to analyze that. So I'll click on View and Edit, which is the second button on the number of buttons on your right hand side. So when you click on that, what does open up here is basically the image of the sound that you recorded. Now you're going to see something on the top portion of the window, which is basically the waveform. The waveform is nothing but the amplitude by time representation of an acoustic signal. What you do see on the bottom portion is what's called as an acoustic representation or a spectrogram of a sound. Now we are not going to go into the details of the spectrogram for all practical purposes of this video, but we would want to know that in the spectrogram what we do see is the voicing bar that's right at the bottom, and this is an evidence of our glottal voice source. You're also going to see a number of darkened bands, alternate dark and light bands. So these darkened bands that you see, these are going to be your formants. Your formants are your points of resonances in your oral tract, and that changes for different oral tract shapes and configurations. So for example, for this sound I said ah, but if I said e, the way that this representation would look is very, very different. All right, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, I want to have an idea about what the formants look like here. So you're going to see a variety of values. What the spectrogram really does is that it divides a voicing into 3 axes. So on the x-axis, that's down here, you see the time. On the y-axis, where you see some values in hertz, those are your frequency. And the darkened bands are basically how much energy or intensity each of those bands have. So because we are seeing this as a two-dimensional image, the three axes are represented as your x-axis, your y-axis, and the z-axis is represented by the alternate light and darkening of the band. So the energy is represented by this kind of a pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up the view a little bit. So I'm going to click on pitch and unselect show pitch. So that gets rid of that blue line. So all you get to see here is basically the way the voicing moves. We're going to not worry about that right now. Let us select a stable portion of the waveform. So to do that, what I do is basically either I select something after the first few milliseconds of voicing, primarily because then your voicing has found a stable source, or I can select something in the middle right here. As you do notice, there are some very clear bands that are visible right here. Okay, so I'm going to select a small portion here. And what I'm going to do is I will zoom in on that area. To do that, I'm going to click that small button in the bottom of the screen that says IN. So right there. So let me zoom in. So there you see that bit of sound source now being zoomed in. So now you're able to see these dark and light bands, right? So I want to find out what are the frequencies of these formants for the sounds that I have recorded. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mouse and cursor almost somewhere in the middle of that line and try to hit there. And that's going to give me my formant value. So if you notice, this line kind of sits on top of another dark line. So what we really are looking at here in this darkened line is your second formant. To get your first formant, I'm going to be selecting the first dark line that is right here, and that's going to be my first formant for my unique production. So the first formant for the sound that I produce at this time is about 816, which is fine. Anything around 700 to 800 is considered okay for the vowel A. And then if I click right around the midline of this, that's around 1504 Hertz, and that's going to be my second formant frequency. Okay, so you have your first formant, and then you have your second formant. And if you go all the way down below, you can actually, if you are very careful, you are able to select the pitch of the sound that was produced. Well, that information can also be gotten when you say show pitch, and my pitch in this case, it's a little bit low. It says 183 Hertz. And typically what your formants are, basically they are integral multiples of your F0 or your pitch value. So if you go on the third line, click right here, that's going to be your F3. And normally what we do is we are mainly looking for the vowel configuration through F1 and F2. So sometimes information that we get from F3 is also important. So there it is. You have your F1, a little bit below right here, midline, F1, your F2, and your F3. Now, if you notice the values are slightly different each time that I click, that's because with even a little bit of change in the location of where you're hitting the cursor, the values can shift by at least 50 Hertz. So as long as you are somewhere in the ballpark, you're okay. But for example, if you got a value of, let's say, 3000 Hertz for your F2, then you're probably looking at the wrong formant. You're probably looking at your third formant frequency instead of your second formant frequency. So you would want to be mindful of that.